In tutorial 1, we'll be looking at the sources of government revenue. And in this tutorial, we are reminded that the government earns revenue from several sources to pay for its recurrent expenditure, contingent expenditure, and capital expenditure. Remember that every government requires revenue, and this revenue is obtained from various sources including taxes, fees, fines, grants, foreign investments, public debt or borrowing. Also, the government gets revenue through the sales of national assets. Some of the public revenue collection agencies include the Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation Limited. Also, we have the Federal Inland Revenue Service. We have the State Board of Internal Revenue Service. We have the National Upstream Petroleum Development Commission, formerly known as the Department for Petroleum Resources. We have the Nigeria Customs Service. The functions of the Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation Limited include exploration, production, refining, purchasing and marketing of petroleum and its byproducts. Also, the NNPC Limited provides and operates pipelines, tanker ships and other facilities to convey crude oil. Also, the NNPC constructs and equips and maintains tank farms, as well as carries out research and development initiatives. The Federal Inland Revenue Service controls and administers the Companies Income Tax Act. The Federal Inland Revenue Service also controls and administers the Petroleum Profits Tax Act. The Federal Inland Revenue Service also controls and administers the Value Added Tax. Also, the FIRS controls and administers Personal Income Tax Act in respect of residents of the Federal Capital Territory, as well as the members of the Nigeria Police Force, members of the Armed Forces of Nigeria, as well as the staff of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and non-residents. Also, the Federal Inland Revenue Service controls and administers Capital Gains Tax Act, as well as the Stamp Duty Act in respect of residents of the Federal Capital Territory, corporate bodies, and non-residents. The State Board of Internal Revenue Service is another revenue collection agency that collects revenue on behalf of the Nigerian government in the respective states. So what are the functions of the State Board of Internal Revenue Service? 1. They assess, they collect and account for all taxes, fees and levies in the respective states. They also supervise and collect all revenues due to the state government with other ministries, extra-ministerial departments, parastatals and government business entities. They also revise all obsolete rates collectible by the board. They initiate review and advise the state governor on it. They also communicate with or collaborate with the federal government on tax and revenue matters, and they liaise directly with the federal government through the Joint Tax Board. Also, the State Board of Internal Revenue Service recommends tax policies, tax reforms, tax registration, tax treaties and exemption to the Joint Tax Board. They also administer the provisions of the Personal Income Tax Act 1993 as amended. They also administer the provisions of the relevant tax laws in the respective states. The National Upstream Petroleum Development Commission, formerly known as Department for Petroleum Resources, supervises all petroleum industry operations carried out under licenses and leases in the Federation. They also monitor the petroleum industry operations to ensure that they align with national goals, particularly those pertaining to gas flaring and domestic gas supply obligations. They also ensure health, safety, and environment regulations are in line with national and global oil and gas best practice. The National Upstream Petroleum Development Commission maintains records on petroleum industry operations, and they advise the government and relevant agencies on technical matters and public policies that can affect administration and petroleum activities. The Commission also processes the petroleum industry's applications for leases, licenses, and permits. The Nigeria Customs Service is another revenue collection agency of the Nigerian government, and the customs is responsible for the collection of import and excise duties, and they account for these revenues collected. The customs also prevents and suppresses smuggling. They also implement the fiscal policies of the Nigerian government. They also generate statistics for planning. They facilitate trade and collaborate with the Central Bank of Nigeria, Nigeria Police Force, the Nigerian Drug Law Enforcement Agency, the Standard Organization of Nigeria, the NAFDAC, as well as the FIRS, that is the Federal Inland Revenue Service. We are also drawn to study the Federation Accounts Allocation Committee, and this committee deliberates and meets to allocate funds from the Federation account to the three tiers of government in Nigeria. The three tiers of government include the federal, state, and local governments. And the Federation Accounts Allocation Committee technical session comprises the Accountant General of the Federation as chairman. Also, it comprises the State's Accountant General, representatives of the following agencies: the Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation, the Federal Inland Revenue Service, the Nigeria Customs Service, the Department of Petroleum Resources, the Revenue Mobilization Allocation and Fiscal Commission, and the Federal Ministry of Finance, as well as the Central Bank of Nigeria. Also, representatives of the National Planning Commission, Office of States and Local Government Affairs, Office of the Vice President, Directorate of Military Pension, Office of Head of Service of the Federation, and Department of Civil Pension are representatives of the Federation Accounts Allocation Committee technical session. The Federation Accounts Allocation Committee technical session considers the accounting returns of revenue collecting agencies. They also meet and consider the revenue available for distribution, and they recommend to the plenary session to adopt the revenue to be shared to the three tiers of the Nigerian government. They also consider other issues sent from the plenary session of the Federation Accounts Allocation Committee. The Federation Accounts Allocation Committee plenary session comprises the Honorable Minister of Finance, who is the chairman of the committee of the session. It also comprises the State's Commissioners of Finance, the Accountant General of the Federation, the State's Accountant General, representatives of the 13 organizations mentioned under membership of the Federation Accounts Allocation Committee technical session, the Permanent Secretary of the Federal Ministry of Finance, or an equivalent officer who is designated by the Minister of Finance. And this Permanent Secretary of the Federal Ministry of Finance shall be the Secretary to the Federation Accounts Allocation Plenary Session. The Federation Accounts Allocation Committee ensures allocations are made promptly to the states from the Federation accounts. and such allocations should be fully paid into the treasury of each state and on the required basis and terms applied required by the Nigerian rules and regulations in force in the government sector. Also, the Federation Account Allocation Committee submits annual reports of its performance and activities to the National Assembly. We have now come to the end of the first in the series on the tutorial on sources of government revenue. Please stay tuned as we go through the remaining 4 lectures on sources of government revenue. Thank you.